Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, determining whether you are a fit for managed services. My name is Pete Amborn, I'm with DWD Technology Group. If you're having any issues whatsoever seeing the screen, you should be looking at a slide right now asking the question, are you a fit, with a notebook on it and some pros and con columns. If you're having any issues with that, please call into our main number, 260-423-2414, and ask for Sherry, and she will hopefully get you all set up. I know we had a couple issues just getting it started this morning, but now it seems like it's up and running fine. Just a couple housekeeping items as we get started here. Again, my name is Pete. I'm a manager here at DWD on the technology side. Sherry is going to sort of be our moderator. She'll help people getting connected, and with any sound issues in the background, you probably won't hear her voice during the presentation though. Once again, our main number, if you're having trouble with the slides, is 260-423-2414. Really brief overview here of DWD if you're not familiar with us already. Half of our firm is a CPA and advisor group who does accounting, auditing, tax services, also do things for individuals, and have a pretty large nonprofit footprint. On the technology side, we do a lot with software, typically Sage, ERP, accounting, CRM, and we also have a large footprint in the nonprofit on that software side as well. On the other side of technology is my area, which is IT, network solutions, and for me, almost specifically managed services. The CPA and advisor side has been around since 1939, so I've been here quite a while. The IT networking side, a little over 20 years. So everyone is muted during the conference. That just makes it easier for me to keep my attention. And then also we record it and can send it out. If you do have questions during the presentation, please make use of the question on your right-hand side there of your screen, which is where it should be, and we will hit those one way or another. If it happens to be after our 30 minutes, I will respond via email, and my email address is up on the screen now, and I'll give it to you again at the end. So why are we even talking about being a fit for managed services? Chances are you're listening to this webinar because you've heard the phrase. Maybe you've even tried managed services. Maybe you're on it right now and you're just trying to figure out, okay, is this really what it's supposed to be? What is it? Am I truly a good candidate for it? There are lots of reasons why you want to ask this, but in general, I tell most people, yes, you are. Because everybody today relies so heavily on technology. And I'll give you just a few brief examples. I don't typically have to convince people of this, but just to make it crystal clear, so many functions now are moving to the cloud, or they're already out in the cloud. If you're an Office 365 user, you know this. That's out in the cloud. It just happens to be on Microsoft servers. If you're an Amazon Web Services or AWS user, if you're a Dropbox user, a Box user, even a Netflix user, tons of things are already out there, and that's just going to become more and more prevalent. Not only that, but things in the office that were not connected before are becoming connected. The term they're trying to tag this with, I see it a decent amount, but most people are not familiar with it, IoT, or Internet of Things. And that's basically means connecting refrigerators and boxes during shipment, things that maybe typically in the past were not directly connected that are now. And unfortunately, one of the downsides to all this connectivity are security attacks are becoming more and more prevalent. It's only going to get worse. I know I will throw some stats out to you later. The numbers are kind of scary, but it just shows that you're relying more and more heavily on that as well. So all this comes down to your goal of limiting downtime. Here's kind of a really quick history of the way people have relied on technology, and then I'll get into what they've done on the Breakfix side. But the rectangle here represents a typical network or a business that would be local. And inside of there, you'd have most likely a server, maybe a workstation or two. I realize for some businesses, this may be a single workstation. But however you operate, you decide. But typically in the past, this has been what most people have had to protect. And literally it was protected with lock and key. There was no connectivity anywhere else. The only thing you really had to worry about were some things breaking on the inside, or possibly an employee trying to walk off with a floppy disk with some data or information. Obviously all that changed once things started to get connected. So I just used a little Wi-Fi signal here to show that obviously it was cable connected before, or even phone line connected, DSL connected. And then people wanted to work remotely on laptops and eventually smartphones. And this is becoming so commonplace that if you have data, if you have resources, programs, anything on your local area network that could help employees or your staff while they're out, they want access to it. And the easiest thing, the thing they always have on them anymore, are the smartphones. Then what happened to security on that? Well, you're kind of securing that connection between the two. Then it gets even more complicated because those same devices are connected to the internet. Things that you see up there like Dropbox, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all those fun things that now you're, in a roundabout way here, indirectly having to protect your network against, because those remote devices are also connected. Some devices you may not have connected yet, but probably will be. Security. HVAC. That's a Nest appliance there, just to show. I think quite a few people are familiar with those. For more on the home side, not commercial side, but just to drive home the point that looks like everybody wants everything available no matter where they are. So the tech is everywhere. How have people supported this in the past? As I kind of alluded to, was something called Breakfix. And by the way, we still do a lot of Breakfix. The majority of our work right now is Breakfix as we're moving people towards managed services. It's an exciting time to be in it as that move is happening. But with the Breakfix cycle, it's literally just the way it sounds. You would hum along, hopefully everything's going great, until something's not. And then once it's broken, one of a couple things is going to happen. It's either going to slow you down or possibly even bring your business to a complete stop. So the sign at the top is not literally a sign that your clients are going to see, but really that's the impression they're going to get. If they're trying to do business and you can't provide a service or a product because your technology is at a crawl or stopped, that's pretty much the message you're sending, is we're down. Lots of user frustration, and I don't just mean on the client level. This is talking about your staff. I hear time and time again how frustrated people get, and it's not just when it comes to a complete stop, but it's just day after day, hour after hour, working at a really slow pace. Another big downside to the break-fix model is unpredictability. Obviously, you don't know. If you did, then it wouldn't really be a break-fix cycle. And when this happens, a lot of times it's more expensive when that happens than if you had done the maintenance to keep that up. A good analogy a lot of people make is with cars and how people have oil changes, the 21-point lube inspection done every once in a while, and how less expensive that is than not doing it and waiting for the engine to lock up. Another very important one, and again, I'll throw some stats at you later, is that you're less secure. And that's one of the things you just absolutely cannot afford to be. If a server breaks, a computer breaks, a printer breaks, a lot of those things, it's inconvenient. You may be slowed down. You may be at a complete stop, but it's fixable and you're not really exposed. If your security breaks, that could put you out of business. And here I will throw just a few stats at you. I got these late, literally this morning, that came in through an email, so I thought I would use them, but didn't have time to add them to the slides. And it's on small businesses. They predict 60% that suffer a cyber attack are out of business in 6 months. And I know just a few years ago that stat used to be a year, so it's actually decreased. They go out of business a lot faster. So that's well over half of businesses that get attacked, that suffer one, that where it's a successful attack, will not be in business after 6 months. 84% of big breaches were detectable, which means if somebody had done something other than the break fix method, had done something a little proactive like a managed services, it could have been avoided. And 4,000 ransomware attacks occurred every day in 2016. Now that we have that behind us, they can look back at the stats, and that's kind of scary. 4,000 attacks a day. So security, obviously a huge deal. And this probably should have been a little bit higher up in the list. But your efficiency, I mentioned that before, and staff frustration if you're not, and business frustration if you're not operating as efficiently as you possibly could. So the bottom line is you want to avoid, if at all possible, following this break fix model. So what are some advantages, managed services? And I guess before we jump into that, I'll give you just a brief idea, if you don't know already, of what managed services are. Managed services means, I guess, in one word, preventative. That's the best way to describe it. You're not just waiting for things to break. And on the least scale, least costly, least amount of intrusion, managed services means monitoring. Pretty much everybody that does managed services is going to do some kind of monitoring. They'll put an agent on your server or servers, maybe your workstations. Maybe they'll also monitor your firewall, your routers, your backup device, whatever it happens to be. They are getting alerts on things that have happened or might happen. A good example, we've been dealing with this a lot lately, are drives that go into a predictive failure state. And that means a hard drive actually starts sending out signals. They can tell, hey, I'm not in the best shape. I'm most likely going to fail. That gives you a heads up. That drive can be replaced. And so if you're on a managed services plan that's doing monitoring and they're doing a good job for you, they'll replace that. You'll experience very little or no downtime. So that's kind of what the left-hand, less intrusive way of managed services is. On the other extreme, you have groups that will manage everything. They manage every single device. They may even be providing you with those devices and tell you what you need to use. And they're even managing your relationships with vendors. Anybody that touches technology, they're managing for you. Obviously, most people fall somewhere in between those two extremes. So one of the benefits as you're looking at managed services is dealing with a team of focused experts. Instead of you having to be an expert or even fairly knowledgeable in a whole breadth of areas, you have a team of people that's all they do. So why is that breadth of knowledge so important? Well, here are some things to think about. This probably should have been called security, but since ransomware has been in the news so much, I just figured I would name it that. It would jump out a little bit more. If you're not an expert in this, you should be, or you should have a team behind you or a person behind you supporting your company that is. This is huge. You probably have to been hiding under a rock for the last couple of years to have not seen a story or two on big companies and small companies getting attacked by cyber criminals. Backups and backup systems these days are no longer tapes. I don't think anybody still sells those. You may be able to get a hold of some of those for parts, but everyone is going to more of a business continuity. You just cannot afford downtime. If you don't feel like being an expert in business continuity and what appliances mean and what all these different chains of backups mean, that's why you have a team behind you that is. Here's a really interesting one, mobile device management. If you have staff, if you have workers that are even using their own cell phones, but they're using it for business, then you really need to be doing some kind of mobile device management because those devices get stolen, they get lost, they may or may not have a passcode set up in those. So anything they have company related, shortcuts, email addresses, data, documents. Maybe they have a Dropbox or something where they're trying to store things. All that's then become exposed. So mobile device management is important, and I won't go into too many details, but if you have a team behind you that's doing this correctly, There are actually ways where you can do what they call a selective wipe, where even though it's their personal phone, you can wipe your company data and access to your stuff off of that remotely, and it doesn't touch any of their personal information. This is really an exciting thing that's coming out. Microsoft actually has a really good product that does this. Another thing that hopefully you have a team behind you and you don't feel like being an expert in is your asset and lifecycle management. People that actually do this, though, it tends to be a spreadsheet that every once in a while they'll pull out, maybe once a year, every couple of years, and update. Or when someone says a machine's super slow or it's getting ready to break, that's when they update it. You really need to be on top of that and plan ahead. So you sit most managers, owners down and say, hey, what do you think you're going to be replacing this year, next year, the year after? They have no idea. And you really need to have a good idea so you can plan for those costs. And another exciting area, at least I think so, is the new stuff. How many people have time to go to the conferences that are on the tech that supports your vertical? Not a lot. I don't see a lot of the actual business owners and stuff at the conferences. It's almost all techies and other people that are directly related to the technology side of the support cycle. So I can't say it's always the most interesting stuff. Most owners, managers don't want to know all this. They want somebody to tell them or help them, hey, what's the stuff that's pertinent to us? What should I be looking at as a possible fit? What's coming down the pipe? So this is all these things and many more are things that you want a dedicated team behind you to be looking at, so you don't have to. Another benefit or a possible benefit are you want to maximize your working hours, and this really it goes hand in hand. It's directly related or indirectly proportional, I guess, to decreasing your downtime. If you're decreasing your downtime, then obviously if that's down to zero, you're getting every hour out of every day. That's awesome. Now, on top of that, though, you want to make sure you increase your efficiency. So you want to maximize the technology you are using. And some people will come in and try to sell you on a whole bunch of new hardware, saying you'll get so much more out of it. That's fine. That is something to consider, I guess. But more importantly, with what you have, are you getting the most out of it? A really good example, we've been doing a lot of this recently, are shifting people to solid state drives, which are incredibly fast, incredibly efficient. Just making that one switch to a desktop or a notebook not only extends the life of that device, but makes it so much more efficient to use throughout the day. I mean, you literally can capture minutes, hours, each and every day just by that one switch alone. So there are absolutely ways to maximize what you already have. And that's why you'd have a team behind you. A common saying is you don't know what you don't know. This perfect example in this case, unless you're kind of a tech geek, you don't stay up on this stuff, so you don't even know what you're missing. And that brings us to one of the things that a lot of people like to lead with, and that's the subject of cost. And I'll give you a couple reasons here in a minute as to why it's not a good idea to have that as your first question, although it is incredibly important. Here's one way. It's predictable and affordable, I guess, is relative. That depends on you and what you consider affordable. But I will say with almost all managed services, your expenses will become fairly predictable, meaning you know month to month what you're going to pay for IT. If you're in with a really, really sharp group, managed service provider, that will not fluctuate much at all. Everyone has big projects that come up. Perhaps it's a server refresh, perhaps you're switching software. So every year or two or three, you may have a spike. But for the most part, month in and month out, you know what your costs are. That's a very big benefit. However, there are some catches here. As you're interviewing people to see whether they're going to provide a good managed services solution for you, and hopefully you get to that point. It may not be right away, it may be down the line, but at some point I think you'll want to interview people just to see if they are a fit for you, and not everyone is. We actually have turned down a couple clients ourselves just because our areas of expertise didn't line up with theirs. So I'll give you some 5 things to look for here in the interview process, but a couple really broad things. Do you think you're going to be interested in being partially or fully managed? Partially, again, could be something as simple as monitoring. And we highly recommend that. If you're not doing anything else proactive or managed services, whatever you want to call that, if you're not doing anything preemptive, at least get going on monitoring. If you have a server, absolutely. If it's running business critical software, somebody should be monitoring that for you. So at the very least, partially, but you may want to think ahead of time just how much you want to be managed and what you're comfortable with. Again, pricing should not be the top motivator. I'm serious when I say that. It may be one of your biggest decision makers when that comes up later, but it should not be the thing you lead with. And the reason I say that is I've seen really top-notch managed service providers not even make it in the door because somebody has looked at pricing, and pricing structures for this kind of service are all over the place. You really need some translating to figure out, hey, this is what they're doing. Is it monitoring? Is it hours? Is it all the above? Who's responsible for what? You really have to kind of go through those interview steps 1 through 4 first before you even start talking about price. Now, if you're halfway into an interview with somebody and they're already saying things that make you sound like they're very, very expensive, then by all means ask about the cost and end that interview if you need to. But 9 times out of 10, you can save that. So key questions. What is the depth and strength of their technical staff? Depth, hopefully you already got this impression from me. As I mentioned, I keep saying team, team, team. Managed services is not at all something a single person should be trying to provide. And I don't care if they've teamed with a company that has a monitoring service, and maybe that company they've teamed with even has a help desk staff somewhere offshore that you can kind of lean on. That is not the same thing. They should have 3, 4, 5 or more people on staff. And one of the reasons is for strength. What are their different strengths, and do they have that breadth of knowledge? It's very, very hard, very difficult, almost impossible for any one person to be an expert in all of these fields that we mentioned before: security, backups, servers, workstations, and so forth. You want a group of people that do that. If you're talking to someone and everything they mention about their staff is Cisco this, router this, firewall this, that's excellent if all you want them to manage are your firewalls and routers. But they should have a breadth of knowledge, all kinds of areas. Depth also comes into handy when if you had that one person supporting you and they want to take a vacation, or they're sick, or they just decide to retire. That becomes an issue. So depth is obviously important. Now, that being said, you should have a lead engineer. Other companies may call these champions for you. They may call it a lead tech. But in a nutshell, it means you're seeing the same person most of the time. The biggest complaint we get when we take over for people that were using other managed services providers, it's not the only one, but one we get every single time is they tell us we were seeing somebody different all the time. A different technician was coming in. They were having to learn stuff that we know the other person already knew. We're paying for that. They're solving the same problem again and again and again. So even though the company should have a fairly deep team, you should only be seeing one person 9 out of 10 times. Do they offer a virtual CIO? This is a term that gets thrown around a lot. That's the Chief Information Officer. If your company's big enough to have one of these anyway, then that service obviously is not important to you to outsource. We consider it incredibly important, so much so that we throw that in at no cost. The virtual CIO meetings, we do them every 6 months. I would say every once a year would probably be okay. Any more than every 6 months is probably overkill. But basically, the virtual CIO would sit down with your lead engineer and you and anybody else from your team and go over all the things that a CIO at your company would go over. You plan for assets, you plan for projects, you talk about any ongoing issues, talk about things that are trending, things you might want to start considering. The virtual CIO tends to be more business oriented than their technical lead engineer would be. So very important service. Range of services I kind of hit on already. And again, nothing wrong with the managed services shop that has 3 services if they're really good at them and if they line up with the 3 services you want. But it's very, very important. If you're expecting someone to support your phone system, make sure that's one of their specialties. And last but certainly not least is cost. I mentioned this before. Please don't lead with this, but obviously it's very, very important, so much so. I got a whole slide here. We'll kind of break down some things on cost. First, well, and I should have thrown this in at the top of the slide as well. Just like in real estate, the 3 most important things, location, location, location. Well, with cost and managed services and IT, the 3 most important things, contract, contract, contract. Really go over this to find out exactly what they're monitoring, whether it's servers or server, workstations, firewall, your backups, your antivirus. Everything should be spelled out. What are they responsible for? And just what support hours are included. And that probably shouldn't have said are any support hours, because I think almost everybody includes some. I guess it's more how many. In the Fort Wayne market, I don't think there's anybody yet offering unlimited support plans. That's a very risky kind of way to do it for managed services providers, and for clients, because they're very hard to write. You have to really, really be good at estimating the number of hours a client is going to use. If we have a really long history with someone, we can get really close to that. But for a brand new client, very difficult, I think, right off the bat to estimate for unlimited hours. You'd have to put enough cushion in there that you'd really be overcharging for quite a while. In our case, and I think in most cases, they'll include hours. So we have clients that are 5 hours a month, 10 hours a month, 20 hours a month. It's just very important as you're looking at that contract to find out what's included. And then obviously as you're looking at that, can you change the plan at any time? Can you do it once a year, once every month, as you could with us? And a lot of providers. And then the other important thing that I didn't put in and probably should have was, can they change it at any time? Obviously, if they find out that you signed on and they give you a discount because you said you were going to use 30 hours a month and you keep decreasing that and you're actually a 5-hour-a-month person, they're probably going to want to change that contract. So looking at that ahead of time, just avoiding surprises, obviously is going to save everyone a lot of grief. So that brings us to the end. I have some terms up here you're probably not going to recognize. This is a generic slide I kind of include at the end of a lot of webinars just in case I mention them and people want more information on them. But just briefly here, business continuity and backups I did mention. I don't think I mentioned Datto by name. If I did, that's just one of the companies we partner with, or that's our main company we partner with on business continuity, top notch. I know I mentioned antivirus, anti-spyware. There are lots of good ones out there. We happen to be a Trend Micro shop, so if I mentioned them, that's why. 2 that I don't think I mentioned that are worth mentioning because they're really interesting. Managed services providers may bring these up as you're talking to them, so it's kind of nice to be aware of terminology. Security awareness is a big deal now. I did hit on security several times, and training your staff on what to click on in emails and what not to click on is becoming more and more important. One of the top companies we keep hearing really good things about is called KnowBe4. And you can just Google them and find it. Kevin Mitnick, a really famous hacker that spent a lot of time in jail, who's now out and working for the good guys, is a backer for this company. I don't know if that's a financial backing or if he's just lending them knowledge, but you'll see his name thrown around. Really interesting. They'll even send out fake phishing attacks so you can see which of your staff, if any, are clicking on those, and they offer online training for people that do things like that. Very interesting. OpenDNS at the top of that list is a nice kind of security blanket that goes over your network. It's Cisco owned now, very top-notch company, and prevents things like people going to sites they shouldn't, whether they're typing that in or whether they've clicked that in an email. It actually has an agent that goes on laptops, notebooks, so that you can get that same protection while you're outside of your network. So just to throw some references at you, if you have any question on that whatsoever, anything I went over for figuring out whether you're a fit for managed services or not, don't hesitate. Email me. I'll answer all questions. I can tell you whether we are a good fit or if somebody similar to us would be a good fit. You can give me your situation. I'll be more than happy to tell you whether I personally think you'd be a fit for managed services. My email address there is at the bottom on that slide, pamborn@dwdtechgroup.com. We appreciate everybody participating. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.